subjects aren't directly related, but there's a certain method in the stories which is related, and that's what I would like to share with you this afternoon. The first story, I hope I'm getting all the details right, but if not, the gist of the story is certainly right. This must have taken place 40 years ago or 50 years ago. This was in Netanya, where the Tzanzer Hasidim have their headquarters. And there was a woman there who was very disheveled, wouldn't speak to anybody, and she only ate from the garbage can. People tried to offer her or talk to her, or absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Finally, they told this to the Tzanzer Rebbe. Tzanzer Rebbe said, look, first of all, when you're taking out the garbage, the food and everything else, prepare a plate of food for her. Put it in the garbage can. Prepare a plate. After a while, he said, okay, now, when you're taking out the garbage, put the garbage in the garbage can and put the plate on the ground, next to the garbage can. So she had gotten used to eating from the plate when it was in the garbage can, so now she's eating from the plate on the ground. And then he told whoever was doing this, little by little, move it closer and closer to the door. Over days, not right away, and she followed it. Finally, into the house and into the dining room, on the floor. And finally, he got her to sit at the table. This was months. And finally, he got her to talk. And she said, I was in the concentration camps with my mother and my younger sister. And then there was a selection, and we were separated. It was clear my mother was going to be killed. And she said to me, take care of your sister. And then we were moved to another camp, and I dug a hole under the floor in the barracks, and I hid my sister there. And I fed her, stole food. I was able to hold her there and feed her. And then we heard that the Allies are coming, and they're going to free the camp. And Nazis went through the camp, as they often did, to empty the camp, might force them to march to someplace else. They come into the barracks, and the Nazi says, your sister's there. We knew the whole time. They pull her out and shot her sister in front of her eyes. So she tells this story to the Rebbe, and she says, I killed my sister. I didn't take care of her. I didn't save her. I killed my sister. That's why she was eating from the garbage can, because my sister died because of me. And the Rebbe said to her, you're just making one mistake. You didn't kill your sister, Hitler did. And that did it. That did it. It freed her from that psychological prison. That's one story. Another very short story, whose subject is my Rebbe Zatzal. A woman came to speak to him from a non-religious background, and he asked her, so what do you do? And she says, I do sculpture, creating statues. So at a certain point in the conversation, he said to her, why don't you sculpt yourself? What does it mean to make a work of art, a statue or a painting or a poem or a symphony? What does it mean to make a work of art? You take materials and you form them into a form where they communicate a message. They have something to either reveal or to contemplate, to express, and it requires enormous, both comprehensive organization and also subtlety of understanding to create a meaningful work of art. You have those abilities. You have that type of inspiration. Use it on yourself. Create a life for yourself. Create in yourself what you could be. Taking her own focus and her own abilities and turning them inward. Not to say she shouldn't sculpt, that's a separate issue. Can't make statues, representational, not representational. But take those same abilities and also use them to sculpt yourself. The third story concerns the Rebbetzin of Simcha Wasserman. The Wassermans were living in Detroit. This was the 30s. And there was an opportunity to create a kollel in Los Angeles. And when Simcha was invited to become the Rosh Kollel, the head of the kollel, and someone in Los Angeles said, I'll take care of the money. You just come and please be the one to attract students and to teach. So the Rav Simcha and his Rebbetzin went out to Los Angeles. And the project started and students came and he was teaching. After a period of time, for whatever reason, the person who had guaranteed the finances had to retract. So they were left with students and a residence apparatus and no money. Well, and they're from Detroit. They don't have connections to Los Angeles. And I don't think either of them had ever run a business or they were both teachers. So they struggled, and it wasn't going well. At a certain point, they agreed that the Rebbetzin will go back to Detroit, take up her old job, where she'll have a steady income, and she'll send some of it to Los Angeles, and he'll stay there and try to raise money there and try to make it work. So she went back to Detroit. And months went by, and it wasn't working. And it was getting worse and worse. Finally, he calls her up and he says, look, we tried, we gave it our best efforts, it's not working. I'll come back to Detroit. I'll pick up my old position in Detroit, and we'll go back to the lives we had in Detroit. She said, we have no children. They never had children. Who could go to Los Angeles to open a kollel? Anyone who has children, there's no education there. Maybe we should do it precisely because we have no children. And that convinced him, and they struggled. And in the end, it was successful. And in fact, of Mendel Weinbach, one of the founders of Ohr Somayach, was a Talmud there, and she came out for Pesach, and he was there. But the Simcha, the Rabbi finally joined the Rav, and they could continue that way. Now, what do the three stories have in common? They have in common a process that psychologists call framing. When something happens to you, and you're involved, and you react. Your reaction is a product of two different features working together. One feature is the objective circumstances, and the other is how you categorize, define, perceive, interpret the circumstances. Both are required because you are an intelligent agent. And your reaction is based on your intelligence, which requires some sort of framing and interpreting. For any objective circumstances, there's usually, I would say always, a variety of frames available. Sometimes a person's being trapped or being crushed by certain circumstances is not because of the objective circumstances, but because of the frame. And if you would change the frame to a different frame, then he'll be able to deal with it in a different way. So the famous example is the glass of water. One says it's half full and the other says it's half empty. So, first quiz question. If one says it's half full and one says it's half empty, who's right? They're both right, because if it's half full, it is half empty. Neither one's wrong. So if somebody responds to it as half full, he's right. And somebody responds to it as half empty, he's also right. Now what are the consequences? Well, take for example, a person who's a quadriplegic. He had an accident, doesn't have the use of his arms and legs. What does he do now? I remember when there was such a thing as postcards, which you can read about in an ancient history book. It's a piece of cardboard with a picture on one side, and the other side you have half of it is used for the address, and half is used for the short message you want to sell. Send somebody, pay 2 cents for it, you put it in the mail, and it got there 6 weeks later, or 6 months later, or it didn't get there, but that was the idea. And at the bottom of the picture, there would usually be information who painted the picture. And there were cases where it said, painted by so-and-so, quadriplegic, using his toes. He had an accident. He can't use his arms and legs. He still has control of his toes, and he learned to paint with his toes. Not everybody responds to a tragedy like that, becoming a quadriplegic in the same way. Some people say, my life is over. And they go into despair, and either die of despair or they spend the rest of their lives in a spiritual coma. Why? Because they look at what they've lost and they don't have. No skiing, no dancing, no running with my grandchildren, no climbing. All those things are lost. That's true. They are all lost. They are. But you could ask, what do I have left? And it's true that there are things that are left. If you focus on what you've lost, that definitely leads to despair. If you focus on what's left, it doesn't have to be that way. I read about one fellow who was a quadriplegic, and he became a weather forecaster. He learned to type with his toes, and he looked at either on videos or on television or on the internet. He saw the pictures of the cloud formations, and he became a weather forecaster. His attitude is, what can I do rather than what have I lost? So choosing a frame will have a lot to do with how you react to the situation. And if there are two frames that are both true, I'm not talking about using a false frame. I'll talk about that in a minute. I'm talking about hallucinating or incorporating fantasies. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a choice between different frames which are all true. So, we'll go back to the first story. It's obvious. She blamed herself for not saving her sister. So first of all, in those circumstances, it was unreasonable to blame herself. She didn't have any control. But more than that, the whole circumstances were forced upon her by evil. So what the Rabbi is telling her, you're interpreting it wrongly. You're interpreting it in terms of your own responsibility. That's not the right way to interpret it. The right way to interpret it is it was imposed upon me and I was a victim. I was also a victim. I'm not a perpetrator, I'm not a criminal, I'm a victim. And when she heard that, then, by the way, her reaction is a quite normal reaction. Sometimes you see this in children. Let's say a parent dies when the child is 6 years old. The child can form a fixation, I killed my parent. You killed your parent? How did you kill your parent? Because 3 weeks before he died, he asked me for a glass of water and I didn't bring it to him. I'm guilty, I killed him. Kids are like that. They put 2 and 2 together, they look for causation, and they can grow up with horrible, horrible suffering until someone counsels them and enables them to see it in a different way. So that's that situation of framing. In the case of what my Rebbe Zatzal did for the girl who sculpted statues, there it was creating a frame for herself, for her own identity, for her self-development, perhaps not replacing a prior frame. Maybe she didn't have a frame. Maybe she was living life from day to day, minute to minute, week to week, year to year, and didn't have an overall organizing picture of how her life should develop or what role she should play in making a life for herself. But he gave her a frame. Of course, he chose a frame which was natural for her because she was a sculptress. So now he's taking that frame and saying, apply it to your own life. In the case of the Rebbe Wasserman, I think it's absolutely astonishing. You need to understand that you don't understand what children are for a woman. Rachel says to Yaakov, give me children or I die. I'm going to die. Very rare for a man to say something like that. So Imenu took very drastic steps to be able to have a child for Abraham. We spoke about that a few days ago. But still, to have the child. So for a woman not to have children, it would be very natural for her to interpret this as being abandoned, being second class. Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't take account of her and doesn't rely on her for anything because she didn't have the opportunity to raise a family. Look at the frame that she put on not having children. The frame is, because I don't have children, there's some mitzvah that I can do that other people can't do. That's what I'm being called to do. What can I do because I don't have children? Her attachment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu was such that she didn't consider the possibility of being abandoned. She just said, he put me in unique circumstances, so it's my job to find out what particular mitzvah this enables me to do that other people can't do. That's the message to me. That's an enormous thing for a person to do. And by the way, I think, this is only my intuition, that the spirit for what she did can be found thousands of years before in what Pinchas did. According to certain sources, when Pinchas grew up, the situation was this. Aaron, his grandfather, became the high priest. Aaron's 4 sons became priests. And all future children born to the 4 sons will be priests. But when that rule was established, Pinchas was already born. So that means that he's excluded. The whole descendants of Aaron will be priests except for Pinchas. He has the black X on his forehead. You're out. Why is he out? What did he do? Is he being punished? No, he's just out. How would you feel if you're in that circumstance? You're just rejected. No, not you. Wouldn't you feel second class? Wouldn't you feel that, Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't care about you, or has a grudge against you, or who knows what? So, there's a challenge to Moshe, a challenge to the Sanhedrin, a challenge to the Torah, Zimri and Cosby. Kodesh Baruch Hu causes everyone to forget the halacha. Only Pinchas remembers it. Pinchas volunteers to avenge the crime that was the challenge to Moshe and to Aaron and to the rest. I think that's very remarkable. He's going to be the only one to wave the flag and say, no, this can't be done. He, I would have thought, would be the last person to do it. He's the one who's been rejected, who's been denied a role. No. He's ready when he's the one who knows to go and repair that breach in the relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So I think that she's Representative Wasserman is illustrating that as well. And the message in all of this is we are framing what happens to ourselves all the time. We need to be self-conscious of that. We need to be self-critical about it. Where are we getting the frames we're using? Who's verifying them? Are they factual or they're not factual? And this should be true all the time. A person's life should be always under the influence of self-examination and self-evaluation. But especially when you feel trapped, when you feel undermined, when you feel that you're without ability to accomplish something important, that's a time to start thinking about reframing. And of course, Torah knowledge is tremendously important, because then you see the kinds of frames that people used in previous generations. Knowing the Tanakh would be very important. But of course, consulting with people who know a lot of Torah, who can share their background, their information, in order to produce an accurate frame, is something which you should make use of. Think of that as a kind of self-check. How am I looking at the things that happen to me, my opportunities, and then to be able to frame it in a more accurate way, and in a way that will generate a different reaction. You often hear the phrase, something happened to me, and when it happened, I was very upset. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Yeah, that's true. Things like that do happen. But the question is, how long must it take you to penetrate the disguise? If you wait for the long-term consequences, it might take 10 years. If you went to someone who's good at detecting disguises and seeing beneath them, it might take you a half hour. Probably, if you did it in a half hour, you'd have a more productive way to use those circumstances. So that's the first thing that I wanted to share with you, the idea of framing, the idea of being self-conscious, and realizing the Torah contains within it multiple frames, and they're the ones, because they're the ones that are really accurate. Are we together so far? Yeah, question?
Can Rabbi give an example for such a case that someone had a present in disguise, and he don't see it, and then someone advised him and revealed the present in half an hour, just to make it more real?
Well, there's one that's close, but it has a twist to it. There was a 30-year-old young man who was trying to get married and was not being successful, and he went to Reb Chaim, and Reb Chaim said to him, your kala, your bride, has not been born yet. Wow, can you imagine hearing that and walking out and thinking, she hasn't been born yet? 3 months later, he was engaged to a new convert, whom we say, in certain respects, a convert is as if they're reborn. So he framed it. It just wasn't obvious to the fellow what the frame was. It became obvious to him afterwards what the frame was. Second. I mean, this formally follows the pattern, but it's, I don't know how psychologically revealing it is. Miriam and Aaron speak against Moses on the grounds that he separated from his wife. And their critique was Moses is a prophet, and we're prophets. And we didn't separate from our spouses. Prophecy does not require a person to separate from his spouse. And therefore, Moses separating from his wife is inappropriate. That's what they said. Immediately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls to all three, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, come out to the tent of meeting, and then he calls to Aaron and Miriam only, and says, come further out. He says to them, how did you dare to speak about Moses? You don't know that his prophecy is entirely different from yours? Night and day. With other prophets I speak in parables, through dreams at night. In Moses there are no parables and no riddles. Everything is clear and precise, daytime, in the most connected possible way. How did you dare to speak about my servant Moses? They framed Moses as just another prophet. Because Moses says your framing of him is entirely inappropriate. His prophecy is on a level vastly superior to yours. And for all you know, it justifies separating from his wife. You don't know differently, so your conclusions were really completely incorrect. That's a way of framing it. Maybe here's one more way. In Korach, we spoke about this yesterday, and I was careful with my vocabulary. Korach's challenge to Moses, the words he uses in the verse are, the whole congregation is holy, and Hashem is among them. Why do you, Moses and Aaron, set yourselves above the congregation of Hashem? And we said yesterday, what principle is Korach demonstrating in favor of? In what principle is he using to challenge Moses and Aaron? Remember, Moses is functioning as the king of the Jewish people, and Aaron is functioning as the high priest of the Jewish people. The principle he's using is democracy. Everyone is equally holy. Everyone is equally close to Hashem. All people are equal. No one is inherently better than anybody else. If there's going to be leadership, it follows, it can be leadership designated by the people. But since everybody's equal, everybody has equal authority, everyone has equal recognition, and no one can say, I'm better than you are. That was the words Korach spoke in order to challenge Moshe and Aaron. Now, what's really odd is how the sequence goes on. Moses says to Korach, look, you really think that you should be the high priest instead of Aaron? Come tomorrow, you and your people and others who are following you, and put a pan with incense in it and fire on it, and we'll all come together, and Aaron will come with his pan, his incense, his fire, and we'll see whom Hashem will choose to be the high priest. Now you read that, it's like a disconnect. Korach's demonstrating in favor of democracy, and Moses is saying, we'll prove who's best. Korach should have said, Moses, you just don't get it. I'm not saying I want to be chosen. I'm saying everybody's equal and nobody should be chosen. And you're proposing a contest to see who's chosen? You just missed the point. But he doesn't say that. He goes along with it. Why? Because the words that he spoke aren't really what's moving him. And Moses says to him, listen, I know better than that. This is phony. You don't believe in democracy. You just believe that you should. Let's put this away. Put this phony excuse away. Let's deal with your real problem. You think you should be the one that's chosen? Let's do it. And he gives in right away and doesn't object because Moses was right. He put out a public frame, and Moses says, you're lying. It's not true about what your real intentions are. So here's a brutal reframing of the circumstance, and then it leads to the conclusion of the story. So I think this is something which is Oh, yes, that's very interesting. I'm going way back now, to the Middle Ages, in the 40s. I had a friend who was stuck. He was stuck on something. Somebody was bothering him. Somebody was really bothering him. He came to me several times, and he said, this guy always has to be on top. He has this superiority complex that he's superior to everybody. Everybody has to recognize his superiority, and it's driving me crazy. What can I do about it? I said, I don't know. I was 12 or 14 or something, and I had no clue. But I mentioned it to somebody else. He said, probably your friend's making a mistake. Probably he doesn't have a superiority complex. He probably has an inferiority complex. And his need to be on top is just to push back his fear that he's really nothing and he's really inferior. Then I thought, hey, look at that. Here's the same behavior, and it could be interpreted in two entirely different ways. Why is he pushing himself to the top? Is it that he's confident and convinced he's best and he wants recognition? Or is it that he's really deeply afraid that he's not best, that he's inferior, and he's trying to push down I thought, well, it's not so simple to interpret something like that. Which frame really is realistic? Here it's a question of one or the other, and probably not both. So there it's not a question of shifting from realistic frame to realistic frame. But for me, it showed me that you have the facts, and then you put a gloss on the facts. And when you hear that there could be a different gloss, all of a sudden your mind is expanded, and you have more alternatives to understand what's going on. I think this goes on all the time. I think it's just a question of being conscious of it and creating a commitment to take it into practice. Now, all of this, I said at least 16 times, is where you're dealing with frames that are all true. What about frames that aren't true? There was a very great psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl, who made it through the war, and he created a school of psychology called either logotherapy or existentialist therapy, based on the principle of the need for meaning. He says a basic human need to have meaning in your life, meaning in what you do. And a lack of meaning can lead a person to drift and become, to go into despair and have no ambition and not make use of the opportunities that are available to him. And meaning can galvanize a person, can focus his psychological energies on doing things that will realize his potential. He didn't put this out as the only human need, but he put it out as one of the basic human needs. So in his book, he gives two examples. One example is someone in one of the Nazi work camps, which were also torture camps, and his brother was in another camp 50 miles away. And this one believed that if he would bear the suffering bravely and well, then his brother would survive. So, making the effort to bear it well for him meant saving his brother's life. And that gave him focus and gave him courage and gave him strength and consistency to bear it well. That was one example. And the other example was a woman who was dying. She was in the infirmary and she was dying. And he says her last few days were made more bearable by the dialogue that she had with the tree outside her window. Dialogue, not monologue. She's talking to the tree, and the tree is talking to her. Well, I hope we're on the same page. The one brother's bearing his suffering well is not contributing to his other brother staying alive, and the tree was not really answering this woman. If you doubt those things, then what I have to say now won't be relevant. It's not true. When I read the book and I spoke about it to people, I said, it seems that from Frankl's point of view, the meaning he's talking about doesn't have to be true. He's a psychologist. He's interested in people's healthy psychological functioning. And if having a fixed illusion, a fixed fantasy, will give him that psychological strength, from the point of view of a psychologist, as we say in Hebrew, matov, wonderful, why not? I said it as speculation. Once a student was here and he said, my mother, who read the book, actually met Frankl and asked him this question, because she had the same understanding. And he said, you're right. From my point of view, whether it's factually true or isn't factually true, if it has the psychological effect that meaning does, from a psychologist's point of view, doesn't matter. Okay, now let's us ask, should it matter? Should it make any difference, whether it's true or not? He's telling us that as psychologists, this will have all the psychological benefits. Does it matter? Let's see. Let's see, first of all, whether we care about our own lives. Do we care whether what we do is real or not? To elicit this intuition, I'm going to use, I hope I'm right about this, I think H.G. Wells was a science fiction writer of the mid-20th century, wrote a story about a dream machine. The idea is that they plug you into this machine, plug things into your brain, and it causes you to have dreams. And they can program the computer to give you any kind of dreams that they program. And you can tell them what kind of dreams you'd like to have. And it's offered to you. There's only one catch, only one condition, and that is when they plug you into the dream machine, you stay there till you die. That's it. The rest of your life, you'll be on the dream machine. Now, you think to yourself, what kind of life can I anticipate in the real world? Ups and downs, success and failures, I'll make so much money, I'll do various things. But now, in the dream machine, I can tell them what I want. All the things that I now dream of doing but give up on because I think they're impossible, I'll have it. I'll have it. I'll climb Mount Everest. I'll cure cancer. I'll swim the English Channel underwater. The world is open to me. Would you take it or wouldn't you take it? So I do find that people are divided on this. Many people wouldn't take it. If a person wouldn't take that opportunity, what he's saying is, even though the dream will be happier and more exciting and more inspiring, and by the way, if a life of complete pleasure would be too boring, we could throw in some pain and some frustration also, and some challenge also. Experientially, it will be the ideal life, but it isn't real. The pull to reality is such that many people won't trade the real world for this experientially ideal dream. Okay, what about the other people? People say, yeah, I would take it. Definitely. Have that kind of experiential sequence, I would leave the real world. Okay. Let me ask you a question. Let's suppose that in the real world, people have studied you and your circumstances, your talents, your IQ, and the rest, and they say you have the ability to cure cancer. Let's take 30 years, the governments will give you unlimited funds, and you'll cure cancer. Okay, that's what they're predicting my life will be because of the way the circumstances in the real world. Now along comes the guy with the dream machine. He said, I read about you. They said you can cure cancer. I'll give you a dream where you cure cancer. The same dream. The same thing, the same experiments, the same government. It just, in one case it'll be real, in the other case it'll be a dream. Now, given those alternatives, what would you do? Flip a coin? I don't think so. Because if you cure cancer in the dream, you don't save anybody's life. Cure cancer in the real world, you're saving people's lives. Here, where there's no difference in the pleasure, no difference in the satisfaction, no difference in the experience, I think everybody would opt to doing it in the real world. If that's the case, we all have a pull to reality. I'm not saying it's the only thing we care about, and we sometimes do engage in fantasies, and we sometimes do tell lies. Yes, there are other things we care about, but we also care about this. So we're not indifferent to the idea, well, you have a meaning, and it's galvanizing you. So what? No, not so what. I want it to be true, because I want what I do to be true in the real world. When we think of people whose lives are based on a false picture of how the world works, we think of them with pity. Look at the wasted life that he lives. And we say it on these grounds. Had he known the truth, he wouldn't have done it. It's a fraud where he's being pushed into a picture of the world that isn't true and using that to guide his life. And because we have a pull to reality, if he knew about it, he wouldn't do it. So we all care about whether the meaning is true. Now, Frankl chose extreme cases. Maybe having a false picture, a false frame, when it's life or death, I could hear that being an open question. Indeed, if it was up to you to teach him the false frame in order to keep him alive, it's not obvious that it would be the wrong thing to do. But that doesn't mean it's a matter of indifference. I was having a discussion with my Rebbe Zatzal about something very complicated, and in the middle, he said to me, would you lie to save someone's life? Which, as usual, was checkmate on what I was thinking about, the position I was taking. Yeah, I'll give you an example. A person goes to the doctor for a workup, and the doctor discovers two problems. A cancer and a weakness in the heart. Well, the doctor may make the following evaluation. If I tell this patient that he has a cancer and that he has weakness in his heart, he will drop dead in my office. End. Dead. Shall I tell him the truth? I don't think so. You don't want to cause him to die on the spot. Maybe with the things that he has, his life could go on 2 or 3 years. Maybe something could be cured and so on. You don't have to die on the spot. Hey, doc, how was the checkup? What are the results? Well, there's one thing that we should do some tests about because it might be a problem. And another thing where perhaps this medicine would be helpful to you and, would forestall other problems. And if the patient will accept that from the doctor, that's good enough. So I'm not saying that the truth is the only consideration, but it is a consideration that we always care about. And that means we're not living lives in the circle of the psychologist where everything is determined, the value of everything is determined by the outcome for my success. That's not where we're living. The outcome for my success is important, but it's also important that it should be real. And that's why we try to emphasize, when we're talking about a life of Torah, there is literature about the various benefits that a life of Torah provides. They're true. And they motivate because there are things that you want out of life. But we also emphasize that it is true, and it's adequate reason to believe that it's true. Because we don't want that lingering doubt. Am I just hypnotizing myself into a dream, and that's how I'm creating the happiness that I'm achieving, or the psychological success I'm achieving? That's something that we don't believe in. We take it very, very seriously that what we say should be true. Okay? And this, when you're helping other people, when you're advising other people, when you're looking for frames, you have to make sure, as best you can, that the frame that you're putting on the circumstance is a real frame. And the last point I want to make is this. Having the frame is a tremendous benefit. Sometimes just knowing there is a frame can be a benefit. In many Sidurim, maybe all, Abraham's willing to sacrifice Isaac is written in the Siddur. Some people say it every day. Let me just give you a little insight to what's going on there. This is something you could write an infinity of pages about. Hashem says to Abraham, take your son and sacrifice him. The commentators point out that prior to that, Hashem told him, Ki beYitzchak yikarei l'chazara, Isaac will be your continuation. And at this point in time, when God tells him to sacrifice him, Isaac has no children. So Abraham is faced with a contradiction. And the commentators say it's an unsolvable contradiction. There was no way for Abraham to achieve a consistent understanding of what he has been told. So much so that there was an Israeli here many years ago who had 5 doctorates. I heard him when I was a student in Boston. I heard him give a lecture, I think he gave it at Harvard. And he wanted to read Abraham as a kind of existentialist. There is no meaning, there is no logic, there is no truth, there is no value. It's beyond all conception and beyond all human. Just sacrifice yourself to the unknown. And I was naive at the time. I was studying philosophy. I was naive and I was very impressed. I came to realize later that whatever the value of such an idea philosophically, it's not a Jewish idea. It's definitely not a Jewish idea. So the Rambam talks about this in the Moreh Nevuchim, and he says that when a person has prophecy, the prophecy is more real than anything else. You can't doubt that you're sitting at a table. You could pretend to have philosophical doubts, but you can't really doubt it. Prophecy is more real than that. And the Rambam doesn't talk about the contradiction between the two prophecies, but it's something which can't be doubted. It can't be. It was an illusion. I heard hearing voices. I didn't eat enough. The sun dazzled my eyes, and so forth and so on. It's not possible to do that. So the prophecy that he had was impossible to doubt as a prophecy. So from Abraham's point of view, they're both real, even though there's a contradiction. And normally we say, well, if there's a contradiction, one's right and one's wrong, or maybe they're both wrong, but they can't both be right. Somebody says a square, somebody says a circle. It can't be a square circle. It might be a triangle, but it can't be a square circle. He's taking it not as something's wrong, but there's something here I don't understand. And I have to live in terms of they're both being right. Now, I want to add to that insight another piece of information. I haven't seen other people use this information, but I think it's relevant. Let's just take a short summary of Abraham's life up until the Akedah, up until the time when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him that he should sacrifice his son. Well, he's told that he has to leave his land because he can't develop the way he needs to in the land, and he's promised children. He waits a long time, decades. Finally, it comes true. It comes true at a period of time when physically neither he nor his wife are capable of having children. They have children. There's a conversation that he has about the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, the other cities there, and God says they're on the brink of disaster, and Abraham pleads for them, and God says, okay, if certain conditions are fulfilled, I won't destroy the city, otherwise I'll destroy the city, and tomorrow he wakes up and the city is destroyed. So that conversation I had yesterday was real, wasn't it? Really real. Nobody knew it was going to happen except for me. I knew, because I had that conversation. That's reality for you. And then there's a war, 4 kings against 5 kings, and the 4 kings conquer the 5, and they conquer the whole area, and they take Abraham's nephew captive, and Abraham sets out with his confederates and defeats the whole army in one night. That's remarkable. Maybe if you're taking bets in Las Vegas who's going to win the war, you wouldn't have given high odds on Abraham. And then he's in Egypt. This is out of chronological order. Then he's in Egypt, and Pharaoh takes his wife, and there's sudden plagues occur to Pharaoh and his whole household. And Pharaoh comes running to him and says, "You didn't tell me she's your wife. Take her, and I'll protect you and give you take your wealth and go." So he said, "My wife was taken into the palace. All of a sudden, bang! This whole palace is undone by a plague." How many experiences like that do you have to think, listen, something's going on here. There's something, some source of power, great power, and it communicates with me, and it cares about me, and it predicts things for me, and I don't have a clue what it is really and what its essence is. I have no clue how it operates. I just know that it is great power, great intelligence, great understanding, and connected to me and caring about me. And now comes the Akedah. I think Abraham's in a situation where he has two foundations to stand on. One is use your head and use your logic. Something's crazy here. He tells me he's going to be my continuation. Now he tells me he's going to sacrifice him. Something's wrong. And the other pillar is look at my history. Look at the things that happened to me. Can I explain them? Could I have predicted them? Maybe there's something going on here that I don't understand. Not what Yeshai Leibowitz would said. There's nothing there, no logic, no truth, no value, no meaning, just sacrifice yourself to the empty. No, not that at all. There is a truth, but I can't get it. At least right now, I can't get it. That's the Jewish frame. The Jewish frame is not the Kierkegaardian frame. The Jewish frame is there is a logic to it. There is a frame for it. I don't know what the frame is. I think that's part of the reason why people read the Akedah in the morning, those who do read it every morning. A lot of life is like that. A lot of life is like that. And we have to rely on the continuity of the Jewish history and continuity of our own history to say, at this point, I'm out of resources. At this point, I can't find the appropriate frame, but I know there is a frame. I hope that it will be revealed to me, ultimately revealed in the times of Mashiach. It may be revealed to me after I die, but in the meantime, my knowing there's a frame is enough to sustain me and to enable me to focus and function appropriately, because there is a meaning there. There is a truth there. And the world is not the hopelessness of the existentialist. Are we together? Okay, so this is a little bit of information on framing. So now we have Sunday night, and that will be the end of the Zman. Maybe on Sunday we'll have another Q&A. I've seen the Q&As are very fruitful. People are really very good. The questions are really very good. And we'll leave with helping to clarify things that are of importance to you. Okay, in the meantime, have a wonderful Shabbos.